meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Forgotten Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Cabe, and I am so happy to be with you. If you are part of the foster care community, passionate about serving, or simply interested in learning more, we are here for you. In every episode of this podcast, you will hear stories from men and women who have experienced foster care to one degree or another. They may have grown up in the system, are caseworkers, foster parents, or others who are here to bring you hope or encouragement. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe and share it with a friend. And remember, you are not alone. I hope you enjoy the Forgotten Podcast. Wow. Well, I've been looking forward to this time with you. And I have to tell you, I just looked on your personal Instagram the other day and saw your love for cooking and your beautiful creations. I'm like, man, you are talented. You are talented.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm also a painter by avocation.
Huh.
So I have a studio, which is the walking distance that I actively work in, and I'm now working on a painting that is 6 feet by 8 feet for a couple in New York City. They commissioned me to do a painting for them. So,
how long does something like that take?
About 3 months, 3-4 months. Yeah.
Wow.
So I don't think I'm an expert at anything. I think I'm a dabbler, and I'm just too stupid.
At a lot of things.
I'm just too stupid to be afraid.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. Well, I was curious though, like when your kids were little and stuff, were you the one to cook at home, or has that become kind of a later in life thing that you've enjoyed?
Luella did it early, and then she was working for the Philadelphia School District and then would go with a colleague to exercise afterwards. So I just started cooking, and when I get involved in something, I just geek out. So I just started going crazy, and she said, go for it.
Keep up the good work. Yeah.
So in the second half of our marriage, I did the Christmas meal. I did Thanksgiving meal. I would take a week off at Christmas and make Christmas cookies.
Oh my goodness. I love that.
I'm just crazy.
That's so fun. Well, I live life all out myself. So when I get into something, I go after it. And sometimes that can be to my own detriment.
That's right.
But I don't know how else to live.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Well, I know you have a lot of passions, right? But what would you describe as your greatest passion?
Well, I think that's very easy. It's just to see the gospel of Jesus Christ applied to every dimension of everyday life. I think people understand salvation past and salvation future. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. But they have a big gap in the middle of their gospel. And I think the gospel is not just this awesome redemption story, but it's a set of glasses I should put on and look through those glasses at everything in life. And when you do, everything changes.
Yeah.
So I think sit in my 31st book, and they're all just that. I just look at something else from the vantage point of the gospel and say, how would this look differently if we looked at things this way? I jokingly say, I've only ever written one book. I just retitle it every year.
Just come at it a little bit different angle.
Yeah, that's right.
That's awesome. I love that. I relate to that for sure. I remember years ago, I was a exercise instructor at an all women's gym. And I realized over time that was something I didn't have the time for. And really exercise wasn't my passion, but people were my passion. And I remember though being, after I had left, but I was still taking classes, I remember kind of being jealous of the instructor up there and being like, really honestly, pridefully going, I could do it better. But I felt like the Lord was just like, no, I've called you to something different. And I felt very clearly, I've called you to be an advocate for freedom, for the freedom of others, and I have such a passion for Christians to experience more of Jesus. Like, I want to see everybody become a Christian, but like you said, it doesn't stop there. It
doesn't.
That's just the beginning. So I resonate deeply with what you're saying there.
Yeah.
Well, I want to start, or maybe just carry on really, with some of your very own words. You said this: I think that there's no more consistent application of what it means to be part of God's kingdom work than to open your home to someone who desperately needs a family of faith and a family of love. And Paul, God opened you and your wife's eyes, didn't he, to kids in needs, and moved in your hearts. And talk to us about, where did that even start for you?
So I have to take you back to early in our marriage. We realized that the biblical story is a generosity story. Could be summarized by those 9 words that everybody knows: for God so loved the world that he gave. That all of the biblical narrative is about just the awesome, caring, merciful, gracious, loving, faithful, patient generosity of the Lord. And it hit us that God makes his invisible generosity visible by sending generous people to give generously to people who need generosity. So that was the first thing. We wanted to live generously, and then it hit us that there is no greater generosity than to provide a place for a person who has no place. I've toyed with actually writing a book on the theology of place, because I think it's so ignored by us, the value of that. Think of, at the end of the life of Jesus, his summary promise was, in my Father's house are many rooms. I go to prepare a place for you. Because Jesus knows, as the creator of all things, how important place is. That's why the promised land. That's why the new heavens and new earth. That's why the temple, where people could go and to a place and dwell with their Lord. So we thought, well, we can't be generous if we are living with a closed home, because God's generosity is a place. And so we've housed homeless people, we've housed men out of prison, we've housed refugees, we've housed troubled young people, and we did that throughout. We've done that throughout our marriage, and often those that hospitality became long-term and into long-term relationships. Often it was dangerous and confusing and perplexing, but we were convinced it's what God called for us to do. And along the way, someone recommended that we read a book written by Lisa Rochette, who became a judge in Philadelphia, but was a lawyer for the Children's Welfare Department. And the book was basically, every chapter was a story of terrible things that would happen to children because of adult decisions. And it was a book we literally wept our way through. It was just heart-wrenching. And God impressed us that we could offer our home to one of these children. We were not interested in adoption because we were infertile. We had 2 sons at that point, but because we wanted to offer a place to somebody who would not otherwise have a place. And we were not able to make girls. So if it was a girl, that would be wonderful. So we thought about the fact that we would like to adopt these terms are horrible, but I'll use them, an unadoptable child. And in the days when we were thinking about adoption, mixed racial children were just unplaceable. And so we thought that's what we're gonna do. And we would have adopted a physically disabled child, but we were afraid that we wouldn't be able to provide all the things necessary. I was, at those days, a very, very poor pastor. And so we reached out to Bethany Christian Services, and we started through the process with them, and I got a call one day. They told me I should probably be seated. They said, "Mr. Tripp, you have a daughter." And we received our daughter Nicole, when she was 4.
Wow.
And I don't know if I've had, and I don't know if I can even emotionally talk about this right now, but I don't know if I've had a more profound human experience, and I don't think I ever will, than someone walking up to Luella and me, placing a 4-month-old human being in our hands, and then stepping back into the shadows. And we realized we were just overwhelmed with the combination of the enormous blessing and the enormous responsibility that was ours. A human being made in the image of God had just been placed in our hands. I think as we stood there weeping, our little boys were afraid of what was happening to Mom and Daddy.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
But that was just an incredible experience for us. And it has filled me with just a deeper awe that I am God's adopted child. That quite apart from anything I could earn or deserve, I'm part of God's family.
Yeah. Man, it's incredible. And it takes me back to 15 years ago when our son, who was 10 months old at the time, was placed into our arms. He was born in Guatemala. And I can still, I remember everything about it. Yeah. It's incredible.
And I think that there are places where the church is done very well at thinking about how to live out this life of love that we're called to. But I think this is one place where we haven't done as well. I'm not sure why that is. Obviously, adoption is costly. It will change your life. Of course it will. But I think it's such an important thing and such a beautiful thing. And we live in Center City, Philadelphia. We have a loft at the edge of Chinatown, and we love living in the city, and we walk everywhere. And because we spend our life on the streets of Philadelphia, we're just blown away by the amounts of people who have no place. And, you can grow hardened to that. They can just be, they're almost not people anymore. They're just objects that you have to turn your head from or step around. And the more you live in the city, the more you get used to that. And yet they are just as deserving of love as I am. They're, if you look into their faces, you see the face of God. They're made in God's image. They have value, and they have stories, and they feel pain and the range of emotions that everybody feels. And so I think it's important that we apply the redemptive narrative to the thing that we're now talking about as well.
Have you ever read the book Same Kind of Different as Me? Have you heard of that?
I am familiar with the book, but I haven't read it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just finished that recently, and it's talking about the unlikely relationship, unlikely friendship that was formed between an international art dealer and a modern day slave. And this man, the modern day slave, was homeless in the city also, and it's profound. It's an incredible book, written by Ron Hall and Denver Moore, I believe, are the two guys. And one thing that Denver, the man who was homeless, said is that we homeless know that our limitation is God's opportunity. I thought that was a really cool statement. Our limitation is God's opportunity. And it's something I think about a lot.
Yeah, I have a corollary thought to that. And this will take a little time to develop this, but I'm convinced that we misunderstand what God between the already and the not yet is working on. And we think that if we follow him and we rest in his care, life will become more predictable and more comfortable. And obviously, if God is working on our comfort, he's a massive failure. Life between the already and the not yet is meant to be transformational. And that is, I'm meant to be transformed by his grace, but I'm also meant to be an intimate transformation in the lives of others. That you can change other people's lives dramatically, permanently. I think when people hear that, then they say, well, I just would feel so unprepared to have somebody at home. And that leads to a second thing, that we're just so afraid of being weak and not being prepared. And the gospel would tell us that my thing I ought to be afraid of is not weakness, because weakness is a workroom for grace.
Totally.
The thing that I ought to be afraid of is my delusions of strength.
Yeah.
And so I love what Paul says in 2 Corinthians 4. We have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power is from God and not from us. Now, a jar of clay is not a picture of strength. You drop a jar of clay, it shatters. It's almost like Paul's saying, we're cracked vessels so that the power that would be seen would be God's power, so that through us, people not only have a place, but they'd come to trust the one who will offer them the ultimate place.
Yeah.
Because they'll realize what we've done. Listen, anybody who has lived with Paul Tripp knows I'm a sinner. That there are times when I lose my mind. Everybody who has lived with me has heard me ask for their forgiveness.
Yeah.
So what does that do? That teaches that person that something is going on here that's more than this wonderful man. Because I lived with this man, and the longer I lived with him, he didn't seem as wonderful as I thought he was in the beginning. And that's exactly what God's intended. Mm-hmm. So it's okay to be weak. It's okay to be unprepared.
Yeah.
But it's not okay to say no to God's call because you don't want to be weak and you don't want to be unprepared. That's not okay. Or you want life to be more comfortable. I say this to parents of teenagers. Make your house the most hospitable house on the block. A place where teenagers can hang out. Have plenty of snacks, plenty of soft drinks. And I say, yes, somebody will break your couch.
Yeah.
Your carpet will get stained and worn, all to the glory of God.
Yeah.
I mean, would we love our furniture and the beauty of our house more than we love human beings made in the image of God? May that never be. But you can, I don't mean to be judgmental, but you can fall in that without even knowing that you're there, because we haven't talked about the things like we're talking about right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this. So I'm a mom of 8, Paul. I have 6 teenagers right now in my home every day.
Last time I read it was 7. So
it was. Busy. We grew. You know, I told you I do everything all out. So, but 6 of them are teenagers right now. And it is funny because we have lived that way as well. We want to. And that's been not because we just thought that from little on up. It's like God has done a work in my heart, in my husband's heart, to open us up like that. But we have one young girl who is our neighbor, but we call her an honorary Cabe. She's part of the family. And I laughed when you were talking about snacks, because I just remember one day she was dropped off. She lives behind our house, but she walked through the front door, and she is very always open to do that. Walked through the front door. Hey, Jamie, walked to my pantry, grabbed some snacks, walked out the back door to her house. I was like, I love it. I love it. So apparently our snacks are better.
Well, you'll like this. So we're living in the city. We didn't live in what we call Center City those days, but we were living in the city, and our sons were skateboarders. And they looked at God's creation from the single vantage point: is it skatable? And so we decided, and they were hanging out with a group of other skaters. In those days, they were lovingly called skate rats. And we thought this was a great opportunity to love our sons and to love their friends. And so we hired a professional to build a half pipe in our backyard.
Wow.
Our backyard was wood. We told our nervous neighbors that they would never skate before 10 o'clock in the morning and never after 8 o'clock at night. And because the ramp was dangerous, we had to get an insurance release form from all the parents. So we met all the parents' families as well. And there weren't many half pipes around in those days, so our half pipe got widely known. But we would have 20 kids out back every day. We'd go out and buy 10 pounds of hamburgers and make hamburgers and pass them out. And one day, I came out Saturday morning, just check the condition of the ramp, and there's a boy there I didn't recognize, and I asked him who he was, and he gave me his name. I said, "Where are you from?" And the words were, now I'm in Philadelphia, Boston. I heard about your ramp.
Oh.
And I said, "Well, how'd you get here?" He said, "I just left school on Friday and started hitching till I got here." I said, "Please come with me in the house and call your mom."
Oh, what, my goodness.
Which he did. And that afternoon, we put him on a bus back home.
Oh, that's
But that period of time, we look at that as one of the sweetest periods of time for our family. So here's the end of the story. I'm walking through Center City, Philadelphia, going to meet somebody from a lunch, and there's a man across the street dressed in a suit with a briefcase, and he starts calling my name, Mr. Tripp, Mr. Tripp. I stopped. He ran across the street, dropped his briefcase, threw his arms around me, and says, "You probably don't remember, I'm Hector. I skated your ramp. Thank you, thank you, thank you for what you did for us."
Wow.
Now, that was just a small investment that kept kids off the street who could have gotten in a lot of trouble and surrounded them with a whole lot of love.
Yeah.
And everybody who has a house has that kind of opportunity. It may not be a skateboard ramp, but you have opportunities to just change people's lives.
Yeah.
Because you're willing to offer your place.
Yeah. I agree. For us, we had gotten invested with a family. We had gotten invested with a family who was vulnerable, and there was a lot of crisis surrounding them. And we would kind of jump in and help in the crisis. And then we thought, if we can kind of get in front of the crisis and maybe provide place, like you're saying, just to give some space. And so every Wednesday night, we'd invite the kids to come in for dinner, and they go to church with us. And that began this relationship, or really just grew this relationship. And kids they would bring their friends, and, we just started, there was new people around the table often. But one of those gals now who would come, she's our newest one that's living with us now. And she's a 17-year-old, and she needed stability and a place. And it's an incredible blessing, and it's incredibly challenging. It's not like, we're not talking about, it's just all our butterflies and roses by any means. It does highlight our weaknesses. In fact, through her coming in and the things she was dealing with and some other things that some other kids were dealing with, I started to realize that I was putting all of their burdens on my shoulders, and I was trying to walk my kids' journey for them instead of with them. And it created in me incredible anxiety, to the point that I ended up going into the ER to make sure I wasn't having a heart attack. But through that, God has taught me so much, and he brought me to a point of complete brokenness to say, I'm here. I'm not calling you to be me to them. I'm just calling you to be you to them. And I'll give you my power, but your job is not to save these kids, these families. Your job is to be with them. And that has really taught me a ton.
That's so good. I just think that's universal for parents, to just load the burden of every aspect of your child's welfare on your shoulders. And that's just not your job. I think the other thing that this conversation brings to mind is that the most beautiful things you learn, the most beautiful changes just take place inside of you. The most beautiful experiences of God's presence, His empowerment, His grace come when you step toward your weakness. When you step into your weakness, not away from it.
Yeah, that's true.
And, who could say, yeah, I'm completely capable of taking somebody I don't know into my home? No one is. And if you give way to that fear, then you step away from that weakness and you don't experience all those wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things that happen along the way as God meets you by His grace and gives you an experience of His promises that you wouldn't have had if you'd chosen to let your fear make the decision for you.
Yeah. Fear is a liar. Fear is a beast, and it's what the enemy wants to derail us from living out. And you talked about this a little bit before, but God is so incredible that He allows us to be a part of helping transform people, but we are transformed in the process. And here at the Forgotten Initiative, that is our whole vision. We want to see people everywhere supporting the foster care community and experiencing Jesus together, because it is not about us just supporting others. By entering relationship with those in the foster care community, we are in turn experiencing more of Jesus, and that is what it is all about.
Yeah, how wonderful is that? I'll share with you another story. So I was a pastor in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I got a call from a couple in our congregation that they had encountered a homeless couple that just needed a place, and so they called me and they were wanting me to say, "Oh, I'll take them." And I said, "Isn't it just awesome that God never gets a wrong address? that you have been chosen for this beautiful thing." And the guy saying, but, and I'm saying, I'm just so thankful that God has given you this wonderful opportunity, and I will be on the phone with you tomorrow to see how it's going. I'm going to pray. Let me pray for you right now. And as you open your home to this dear couple, after he got through being mad at me and his fear, this couple ended up living with him for about a year. A tremendous realtering of the trajectory of this other couple's story. But so afterwards, as the couple were now on their own and doing very well, I said, "Tell me about that experience." He said, "I am just blown away by all the changes that took place in that moment." I said, "Yeah, I know that couple's really in a different place." He said, No, Paul, not that couple, us. He said, "We are completely different people now." And he said, "Thank you that you were wise enough not to take us off the hook. Because we now look at what was a hard year as a year of just awesome blessing from God."
Yeah, that's it.
So I think what you've given yourself to is very, very important, because if there's a needy person in a room and a helper in a room, God is working on everybody in the room.
Yes,
That's the way it
He
works.
is. Yes, He is. Amen. Oh, I love that. The whole fear thing just made me think of one other experience for us that I'd love you to see what you have thoughts on afterwards as well. But years ago, we were trying to adopt from Uganda. And we had a referral of a little girl. We went and visited her. We were with her. We went to court with her. And at the end of the day, the judge said, no, that she's not going to be yours. We're not going to release her for adoption. And it was crushing. And it was really hard, and we didn't understand, and it impacted our other kids of like, why would God take us all this way and then say no? Like, why would he do that? And we took some time off because we were hurting and we needed to heal. But ultimately, me and my husband, Clint, had to pray and say, okay, God, does this mean you were saying no to adoption? Or did you just have something different in mind? And are you still calling us to step out in adoption? And he showed us and gave us the peace that if we say no to adoption, it's because we're afraid of getting hurt again. That would be the reason we would say no. And we just knew we couldn't do that. And so we talked to our kids and we asked them, guys, listen, we could go through this all again, another child, go to court, judge has ultimate authority. We could be hurt again. Is it worth it? Do we do this again? And unanimously, they said, yes, yes, we step forward again. And we did. And now our little guy, Friday, his name is Friday. He came home about 5 years ago, and we would have never, no, he came home 7 years ago. And we would have never known him had we said no because of fear. And so just another encouragement. And it was scary. It was absolutely scary. But I'm so grateful God gave us that ability to step forward, because our lives will never be the same.
Yeah, and I think of our daughter, Nicole. Her birth mom was a teenager who got unexpectedly pregnant and was a lot of pressure on her family, by her family, to have her abort the baby. And she thought that was wrong. And so she was on her own, and she was shopping for a place where her daughter would be cared for. And the fearlessness of this young lady is just amazing to me. We never met her, but she is forever our hero. And Bethany said to us that we didn't interview this girl, she interviewed us, because she wanted a place where her daughter would be taken care of, because she knew that she was not capable of providing the care that was needed. Well, Nicole is now happily married and is the mother of a 16-month-old little girl, and is pregnant again. And the birth of Harmony our granddaughter was so thunderous to us, because without this girl saying no to fear, being willing to stand alone, and finding a place for her baby, Nicole would have never been born, and Harmony would have never been born. I mean, it's just incredible that how the refusal of this one person to give way to fear has written such a beautiful story. Was adopting Nicole easy? No. She felt not only the typical identity issues that adopted children feel, but she felt like she didn't racially belong, and that made life hard for her. And we've been through really, really tough things. But we're now celebrating things that are not just the result of our decision, but the result of the decision of this teenage girl who said no to fear and did what was right.
Yeah, the impact is generational.
And you see, if you're one of if you're one of God's children, you have reason to say no to fear. I mean, it doesn't mean that you're stupid. There are things in life that you should be afraid of and you should avoid.
Sure.
But we're talking about that fear that paralyzes you, that sets the agenda for your life, that causes you to say no to things that God's probably calling you to. Well, we have ample reason to say no to fear because we are the sons and daughters of the Lord Almighty, the King of Kings. Creation does his bidding, and he has set his love on us. We're his kids.
Yeah.
So I'm never in this thing by myself. Even if I don't sense God's presence, God is working on my behalf, even when I don't have the sense to know that he is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I'm stepping toward weakness, I'm not being stupid, because my potential is not based on the sum total of my strength.
Yeah.
Because the Bible says it's no longer I who lives, but Christ lives in me. And the life I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me, gave himself for me. I'm never in this game by myself. So I'm actually stepping into weakness is stepping into a greater experience of power than I would ever have on my own. And, well, you know this is true because of what you've given your life to personally and what you've given your life to in terms of ministry. Without that message, makes this thing an awful lot scarier, an awful lot harder.
Yeah. Well, that is good news. That's what the gospel's all about. Oh, man.
Absolutely.
Well, Paul, go ahead.
Again, I want to say this again. It's not just good news for our future.
Yeah.
It's good news for right here, right now. Step into that good news and watch what God will do.
Yes. Yes. Amen. Is there anything, as we kind of close out here, is there anything else that's just on your heart that you want to share with our listeners before we close?
I just want to say, determined to be a tool of God's generosity. There are things you can do. There are things you can give. There are things you can say. There are places you can offer. Everybody has something that can help or rescue or change the life of somebody else. Be part of that.
Yes. Amen. Paul, thank you so, so much for giving us your time so generously today. Appreciate it.
God bless you and pour blessing down on all that you're doing.
Thank you.
Well, I hope that today's episode encouraged you wherever you are on your foster care journey. We want you to stay connected, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you will never miss an episode. Also, we have great content at theforgotteninitiative.org. Thank you for watching. I cannot wait to be with you next time.